You've come a long way, faith-based films. Now, the genre has been around for decades, movies like Ben-Hur, The Ten Commandments, but the modern faith-based movement really kickstarted with The Passion of the Christ, the great Mel Gibson film. That movie made all the money and showed Hollywood and some storytellers that, hey, there's a huge market for people who want spiritual stories, and they're not getting it from the usual suspects.
Are you ignoring me?
So filmmakers filled in that gap the very best way they could by making movies. And some of these filmmakers didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have A-list actors. They didn't have all the experience and all the technology necessary to make movies like you see in any theater. So some of the early films were a bit raw, a bit rough around the edges. The acting was a bit suspect. The budgets just couldn't convey mainstream theatrical presentations. The stories could be preachy, they could be predictable, but you know what? They often made a lot of money because audiences were starved for something spiritual, a movie that spoke to their values, a movie that they could rally behind. And they looked past some of the flaws and said, hey, you know what? I know it's imperfect by many stretches of the imagination, but I like it. I want to see more of it. This really means something to me. And along the way, these films got better. They got bigger. The budgets were improved. Sometimes you didn't get A-list actors, but recognizable names, people we've watched for decades, all of a sudden started gravitating towards these faith-based movies.
Hallelujah.
And along the way, the stories, the topics, the conversations, well, that broadened as well. All of a sudden, you have a movie like Nefarious, which was a horror-themed faith-based movie, or something like Believe Me, which poked some satirical fun at the Christ community. This whole genre has really matured in a very powerful way in recent years. The box office has improved as well at times. And not every movie has been a hit and not every movie's been good, but just to watch this particular genre grow and evolve has been fascinating for me and quite rewarding as well, not just for people like me, but also for storytellers who want to get more access to the Hollywood marketplace. Which brings us to Spencer Folmar. He's a filmmaker who has a different take on faith-based movies to a degree. They are godly for sure, but he likes to look at the rougher edges around life and bring that to the screen. In his philosophy, sometimes life has profanity. Sometimes there is violence that could be captured on screen. He's not making hard R-rated movies, but these are the kind of faith-based stories that show life as it is, not as we always wish it would be. And that's the difference. He's made movies like Generational Sins and Shooting Heroin. These are raw stories that talk about hardships and redemption and spirituality in a way you don't often see in mainstream Hollywood films. He's brought that philosophy to a new-ish, it's been around for a couple of years now, film festival. It's called the Hard Faith Film Festival, and it conveys what he likes to bring to the screen. These are movies about faith, about redemption, about uplift. But again, it isn't cookie cutter, it isn't predictable, and sometimes it could be a little upsetting because, again, life doesn't always work out exactly as we plan. So this particular festival, the next one's coming up in December in New York City, looks at films like that. And he wants your film to be a part of it. Now, the festival itself is going to be in December, but we have until October 20th to submit our films for his festival, and he will check them out and he will see if they're a good fit for the Hard Faith Film Festival. So just go to hardfaith.org. You can find out more about the festival, about Spencer, about the kinds of movies he's made over the years, and about past festival results. It's all there. It's a great resource, and also just a chance to get to know Spencer and what he's all about. And after you do check out the website and kind of poke around a bit, you can listen to this episode. We have a great conversation about faith, about movies, about how he got into this field in the first place. I always love those origin stories. I mean, they're always kind of fascinating to me. Why would you go into a field that's so darn competitive and it's so hard to get the reward you need or want or crave? But many filmmakers do. It's in their blood. They can't help themselves. And Spencer is just quite like that as well. So I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Spencer Folmar. He is a storyteller to watch, and he's got a film festival I think you're going to want to hear more about. Well, Spencer, thanks for joining the show. And I often start with a very basic question because I think it's important. I want to just get a quick origin story from you, how you got into film directing. I know that's your passion. we could talk for days about it. I'm sure you could as well. But just maybe why you got into this field, and maybe a key point or two along the way that told you you were on the right path. I always find those moments fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Christian. Really
Sure.
enjoy reading your articles and reviews, and I've been a big fan of yours over the years. I grew up in very rural Pennsylvania, and there wasn't a lot to do. I grew up outside of State College, Pennsylvania, to where Penn State University is,
Mhm.
and I always loved movies. So I was blessed at a young age, around 7 years old. I knew that I want to be a film director. I want to work in movies, and I grew up going to the local drive-in theater, the single-screen historic cinema, and I
Mhm.
just always wanted to be in films. And I've really been studying, working, going towards that goal my whole life.
Right.
I went to NYU for my film degree. I converted Christianity after college, and after I converted Christianity, I realized that if I was going to make films about my new faith, I want to make them
Mhm.
accurately. And so I went
Yeah.
to seminary at Reformed Theological Seminary and got my master's of theology, so I could combine both hopefully great cinematic art and
Mhm.
accurate theology. And it
Yeah.
was during seminary actually where we coined the term hard faith, because like I said, didn't grow up in the church, never heard of faith-based films.
Mhm.
After I converted to Christianity, started watching faith-based films, I didn't relate a lot to what is mostly family-friendly content, just because that didn't relate to me or connect with where I was. And so I thought, the Bible is pretty R-rated. Why couldn't we have faith stories in the real world? And
Mhm.
so we coined the term hard faith to encapsulate stories about real life scenarios, stories
Mhm.
beyond Sunday school stories, that have a faith message in them.
Yeah. Andrew Clavin is of a similar mindset. And listen, there's nothing wrong with films that are G or PG that have a certain point of view. And I think there's room for everything here. But he talks about how, life is hard, it's complicated, faith can be complicated, and that kind of erasing some of the harder edges maybe can be counterproductive. So I assume that's sort of part of your belief system as well. Were there
Yeah.
films along the way that really captured that? I mean, the hard faith that you're working on is your own beast and your own creation. And obviously, the festival, we'll get to that in a minute. But were there films when you were growing up that you saw that maybe captured part of that ethos?
My sister took me with her Bible study to see Passion of the Christ in theaters,
Uh-huh.
and I was like in high school, and it
Uh-huh.
was obviously a very R-rated movie, and it was so moving. I mean, like we stayed in the theater afterwards, no one said a word, and I didn't think much of Christianity at the time or even believe in
Mhm.
it, and it was just such an impactful, well executed film.
Yeah.
And since then too, I mean, like Calvary is a film that I highly recommend with Brendan Gleeson, Irish
Mhm.
film that I just think is very hard faith, and yet it's a subtle, strong faith message. Obviously, Hacksaw Ridge, another great, I
Yeah.
would say,
Yeah.
hard faith film. And there's plenty more, but these are some of the highlights I'd recommend.
Yeah. Along your journey, you learn as you go, you watch films, you make films, you become a better filmmaker. How do you think you've improved as a storyteller over the years? I mean, you're still a pretty young man and you got a lot of more stories to tell, but just, I'm always curious as artists, I think the best artists are able to reflect on what they do, accept new information, grow in ways maybe they didn't expect. But just as a filmmaker today, as opposed to when you first entered the scene, how do you think you've kind of upped your game, worked on your craft, or just maybe you're just improved?
Well, I would say this, and I just recently shared this thought with a friend, but I think whenever you release a film, and especially a film that gets film critics, you being a critic yourself, Christian,
Mhm.
I actually think that's a tremendous blessing, because no matter how the film, like whoever you're making it for, whatever audience, you're
Yeah.
getting critic reviews from people who analyze films at the highest level every day. And so even if I make a conservative film or a Christian film, I'm still
Mhm.
getting critic reviews from people from all sides of the aisle, all different walks of life. And so even like in Generational Sins, I remember I had an absolutely scathing review from the Hollywood Reporter. And I've had other ones, other terrible reviews. And I see it and I think, the easy kind of cop-out answer would be like, oh, well, they just hate it because it's Christian. But I look and I break down every single line, and though that might be true to some regard, there are a lot of feedback notes there that I have taken into account, reflected upon, and I've tried to become a better filmmaker. Even something that was I find like a little success story for myself is that from Generational Sins to shooting Heroin, almost no major critics or news outlets liked Generational Sins. And in shooting Heroin, Owen Gleiberman, head critic at Variety, gave us a positive review. LA Times gave us a positive review. Hollywood Reporter still hated it. But still, little progress made. So I think listening to the critics and not letting it weigh you down, because you have to keep moving forward. You have to continue making films. But just learning and listening to audiences, I think you can learn a lot from that.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's a double-edged sword, because I do think that there are some critics who, like you said, kind of have an axe to grind before the movie even begins. But the better ones, even if they come from that mindset, will still analyze the film and maybe have some, constructive criticism, which we could all, use or at least listen to along the way. I was kind of curious your thoughts on, I've been covering the faith-based film genre for a while now, and I know maybe even people quibble with the name, but just for argument's sake, I've seen progress here. I've seen a variety of stories. I've seen films that dip into areas you didn't expect, like horror and comedy and satire. It feels like such an unique genre in it's often outside of the Hollywood ecosystem. But I'm kind of curious. This is your bread and butter, and you know it so well, and you work within it, and you push the boundaries too. What's your take on where faith-friendly films, for maybe that's a better way to say it, have gone in recent years?
So whenever Generational Sins came out in theaters 8 years ago, it was mostly just shocking news because it was a PG-13 film that had adult language in it, and mostly got a lot of hate from traditional Christian markets and Christian consumer review companies. But I think that the faith industry as a whole has matured a lot in all positive ways in these 8 years. There's higher budgets, better quality actors, more well thought out, better written screenplays. And I think Hollywood itself is making so much garbage that there's more artists that are willing to be in a faith-based world, even if that's not like their greatest passion, or like they're not someone that's first only identifying as a Christian. They're willing to work in these worlds because some of the I would argue that some of the faith-based films that are coming out today are better than most of what Hollywood is producing. So I'm very, very hopeful. I think at the end of the day, an actor just wants to be attached to a great script or a great story or a great project, and they will, good for them. They'll look past whatever maybe they don't align specifically with a certain film or theme, but great role is a great role, and you can't turn them down. And then the competition's so fierce. One of the things we talked about just before the mics went on was I don't know if you've worked with him or about to work with him, but you're kind of intertwined with Kevin Spacey, and of course, as we all know, what he's gone through in recent years. But just want to get your thoughts on that, because I think a lot of actors are flawed, and I think a lot of actors have done bad things, and I think there's obviously a spectrum there for sure. I don't want to dismiss things, but what were your thoughts about the possibility of working with Kevin, and I don't know how far that's gone along? Yeah, so a year ago now, October of 24, I was on set for about a week and a half with Kevin Spacey. I was one of two producers on a film called 1780. It's American Revolutionary War action film. Kevin is a supporting lead. And so I was the producer kind of in charge of Kevin, handled all of his accommodations and worked with him daily. And so I had a lot of time with Kevin, and he could not have been more professional and more lovely to work with. It was a large cast, and I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of different actors over the years, some Academy nominated, and he is Academy Award winning twice over. But even before he got to set, he called our director and got the writer on the phone and went through a multiple hour exchange trying to get the context, the historicity, the character background, just doing so much homework for, at the end of the day, was an independent film. And so just just a real professional and some of the best acting I've ever had the chance of witnessing in real life. So, the arts and the church should be a place for redemption. It should be a place for second chances. I don't know where he's at in his redemption story, as far as the public approval or his own personal, process. But at the end of the day, he is a great artist. And I don't think we should cancel anyone, especially if someone wants to get better.
Yeah. Well, it's ironic you mentioned redemption. I mean, that's part of what Hard Faith is all about. Talk a little bit about that from I want to get into the Hard Faith Festival, which is coming in December. We'll get into that in a minute. But what that evokes, because it isn't just faith leaning. There's more to it about that. And I think it's why some of the labels and the boundaries start to fade away a little bit. But just in your own words, to a layman, even just like an elevator pitch, how would you describe Hard Faith, either the festival or the ethos itself?
So Hard Faith bridges the gap between traditional faith-based films and Hollywood cinematic entertainment. It bridges the gap in between it. We hold up these truths that life is hard and God exists. That's where we start with all of our audiences. And so we want to have an approachable story that deals with the reality of the real world. We do not censor it. We do not sand off the rough edges. And so a lot of our productions are R-rated or PG-13, and we like to deal with real human issues because most people don't convert to Christianity or choose like a faith system because they want to win the football game or, trivial, trite issues that most faith-based films deal with. They convert or they pray for the first time because they're in a life crisis, because their life is falling apart, because they're dealing with addiction or suicide or depression or something meaningful and life-changing. And those are the topics that we want to address, and I think that faith can address those uniquely, and sadly most faith films and even most churches do not address these hard, dark topics, and they stay away from them just out of fear. And I don't think we should be fearful. The number one commandment throughout Scripture is do not be afraid. And too often we are afraid and we don't deal with these subjects, I think mostly out of fear of man, because we just want to be the cleanest, neatest, safest Christians we can be. And I don't think that's that exciting, especially in art.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you was that the festival is coming December, but you're looking for submissions now. I believe October 20th is the cutoff date. So if I'm a filmmaker, I've got a project, films that reflect that worldview, those stories, that redemption, that sort of sentiment is what you're looking for. Any recent movies that were part of the past festivals that really embody what you're looking for? Maybe that will give people a better idea of what kind of film would be the sweet spot here.
So we've done the Hard Faith Film Festival in Hollywood for 3 years. This is our first ever regional Hard Faith Film Festival event. It's one day. It's in New York City on December 6th in Manhattan at the Producers Club, just a block away from Times Square. It'll be from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. all day. We have 7 different categories. We have feature film, documentary, short film, student film, experimental, screenplay. So if you're just, if you're a screenwriter, you can also submit your screenplay. And we also have a pitch fest where if you just have an idea, you can pitch your fest in front of live judges and audiences and get feedback. But one of our recent films that won Best Feature Film just at this past July Hollywood Film Festival was Triumph of the Heart, which is a feature film about a Catholic saint that died in the concentration camps in World War II. And it's a beautiful movie. It just had its theatrical release. And we're really glad that we were able to premiere it at the Hard Faith Film Festival in July. And it is very high art. It's a great independent film. And not all of our films have to be explicit, like faith reading from the Bible. There's a pastor. It can also be metaphorical. It can be faith inspired. It can be faith adjacent. We are trying to reach people mostly outside of the church. We're looking to bring the lost sheep home. And so you don't have to check a lot of boxes. If you feel like your film doesn't fit in other, especially faith festivals, you'll probably fit in at Hard Faith.
I just get back from a festival in Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Moving Picture Festival. And the spirit and the camaraderie and the sense of community, and it almost sounds like a cliche, was just palpable, and it's just a wonderful place. And I'm sure that your festival also kind of has that sensibility. What does it mean to a filmmaker? I mean, obviously, if you're in a festival, it doesn't guarantee distribution, doesn't guarantee theatrical release. It doesn't guarantee much, but there is something about that festival experience. And I just dipped a toe in it just a few days ago. This is part of your bread and butter. Talk about why festivals matter at this point in the culture.
I think film festivals are so important, especially in today's day and age. Going to the theaters used to be a community event, and that was so gratifying, just the celebration of cinema. But we've reduced it to mostly watching, films on our cell phones or back at our home. And the communal experience of celebrating cinema is magical, and we all love films, we love stories, but also celebrating these new independent film artists and getting to see your film on the big screen with an audience of people who love film, right? Like, it's not just like an audience that are just going because they read the comic book, or an audience that is just going because their parents dragged them. Everyone's there is committed for cinema, and they're committed to supporting these independent filmmakers. Even if they're a first-time filmmaker, I mean, that can be a life-changing experience, and the energy is palpable.
Yeah. And by the way, the ones I saw some films that were a little, dubious in quality, but they were all original, and they were all fresh, and they all had a vibrancy to them that I just caught. Tron Ares, and is visually spectacular, but it didn't have a heart. And even the lesser films that I saw over the weekend, they had a heart, and I thought that was important. Before we let you go, Spencer, I want to talk a little bit Saint Nick of Bethlehem, which I believe is coming soon. Just give us a little sneak peek about that one, because it sounds pretty seasonable. I'm sorry, struggling with that one. Anyway, you tell me more before I stumble even further.
Saint Nick of Bethlehem is a Christmas movie about a man who lost his only son tragically, and through his grieving process became a father figure and a Santa Claus figure to the community. It's based on a real-life individual whose name is Alan Smith, a guy I grew up with in central Pennsylvania. It's a film that I've been working on, trying to get into production over 10 years. It is having a theatrical release in November, and then it'll be available on home video in December on all platforms, video on demand, some streaming channels. And we're really excited to bring it out. It is a film with a heart message. It's somewhat of a heavier message for a Christmas movie, but it also has a whole lot of, holiday cheer and redemption in it as well.
Yeah. In reading a little more about you, we've kind of known each other a little bit for years, but the word resilience kept coming up and up and up. And I know Mark Joseph is a really good producer. He did Reagan, and he wrote a whole book about how bleeping hard it was to make Reagan, but he did it. And you and I are talking here. You've got a film festival. You got films in the works. You've made films already. Resilience just seems like the number one characteristic you need as a filmmaker, because it's just so hard. Anything you can share about that, or even sort of a inspirational message we can end this conversation with, because filmmaking is so hard.
Resilience is absolutely key. There's been, and I just looked this up recently, there's been about 250,000 feature films, narrative feature films, not documentaries, made since 1949. Only 38% of film directors make a second feature film. So almost, like 3/4 of them almost are cut out because it's just so hard. Then only 8% of all film directors in these last, 80 years have made more than 5 feature films. So I'm already in this small 8% of film directors, just because it's so difficult to continue making films. It's a very difficult industry. There's a lot of sharks in the water. It's hard to make a film. It's like a new startup on every single movie. I know Mark Joseph's journey just from the outside, and he was a producer on 2 of my films. And him making Reagan was a Herculean effort, and I was just so excited and proud of him for getting that film across the line and making such a great movie, which was Reagan. But it is resilience. A quote from Charles Spurgeon is, "By resilience, the snail too made it to the ark." So it's so difficult. But resilience, I think, is one of the best attributes that I could ever give to someone.
Yeah. And I think that applies to many things in life, but just for filmmaking, it is It is the pushing the boulder up the hill, but you've done it more than a few occasions. We appreciate the work you do, and I'm looking forward to seeing St. Nick of Bethlehem again coming out this season. And also check out Hard Faith. Just go to hardfaith.org. You can find information about Spencer's films, the film festival, submission information. All the details are right there, hardfaith.org. One-stop shop, let people know what you're all about. Spencer, thanks so much for joining the show, for sharing the information, and little pep talk too. I like that. I think for people who do quit, it's not for them, and it's understandable. But I just have all the admiration for filmmakers who just won't stop and they get their films up. Doesn't mean it's Citizen Kane. Sometimes it could be an average film, it could be a below average film, but what an accomplishment, what a blessing, and your films are far better than that. So I appreciate all the good work you do, and hopefully we can talk again.
Thank you so much, Christian. Really appreciate the time.
Well, that's it for this bonus episode. I've got a few more interviews in the proverbial can, so we'll be rolling them out as soon as humanly possible, trying to get more episodes on this YouTube channel and, of course, on iTunes, wherever you're listening to this podcast. And in between shows, do check out HollywoodInToto.com. Of course, it's my website, now 11 years old. It's kind of a long time in web terms, right? And it is like the show, the right take on entertainment. It's got news, reviews, commentary, everything going on in pop culture from a right of center perspective. And the one thing we really focus on is stories that don't get told enough in the mainstream press. Just one example, lots of Jewish artists have been canceled over the last few months based on the whole Palestine-Israel debacle. Do other sites cover that? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they ignore it. Sometimes they don't connect the dots that this isn't just a one-off problem. It's happening again and again. And that's where Hollywood and Toto comes in. And on the lighter side, it's October, it's Halloween season, and we've been running a whole string of classic horror movie reviews. It's a trip down memory lane for me. It reminds me of films that I want to watch again and again. And of course, 'tis the season for scary movies. So do check out the great horror movie reviews at HollywoodInToto.com by our great guest contributor, Barry Wurst. He's a film professor. He's a movie critic. He just loves movies, and he shares it in the best of ways. And I'm so proud to have his work on my site.
It's an honor and a privilege.
So do check out HollywoodInToto.com for those kinds of reviews and so much more. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And of course, be good, be strong. Doctor's orders.